President, please be seated. The chamber is back in session, and the floor is given to the co-prosecutor to put more questions to the witness. You may now proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. So you said just before the break that Miasmut was the head of Division 164 and that Dim was his deputy until he was arrested. Were there other committee members in Division 164, and who were these members?
Mihmut was Mihmut was first, and the second one was Dam, and the third one was Chang. But I could not recall their surnames, and the fourth one was Nyan.
And were all decisions and orders concerning operations of the regiments of Division 164, as well as the assignments, were all these taken in a centralized way by these 4 committee members at HQ?
The 4 persons had the authority to issue order based on the particular needs, and their order went to Regiment 140 and the orders also came from the division level to Unit 62, 63, and 64. So the order came from the 4 persons I mentioned earlier.
So, in terms of the chain of command, you just spoke about the division, which would issue orders to the different regiments. Were the orders and instructions then sent to a lower level by the regiments, and to which level? And how would you receive the orders and instructions from the division?
Regarding the chain of commands, the division issue order to the regiment, and the regiment issue order down to the brigade, and brigade down to, rather, the regiment down to the battalion, and battalion down to the company.
And now, regarding the reports that had to be drafted, did these reports follow the same pathway, but in the opposite direction? That is, say, from bottom to top. That is to say, would you report to your battalion chief, who would report to the regiment chief, who would then report to the division chief? Was that the way things happened?
Yes, that was the way things happened. We needed to report according to the level, each level of higher authority. That was the common practice at that time.
In this hierarchical structure, which was very, in fact, strictly hierarchized, did the lower ranking cadres, that is, say, cadres of your level, have the right not to obey orders? Did they have the right to ignore orders coming from the higher levels?
At that time, in my capacity as the commander of the company, whatever the order came from the upper level, we could not avoid it. We had to carry it, and this was what I said from my capacity as the commander of the vessel. So we had to implement according to the order. For example, as to how many days the training need to take place and how many days the trainee could take rest. So everything was based on the order.
Now, regarding field operations, were there any exceptional instances when you were allowed not to obey orders, or did you have to obey orders at all times?
ការអនុវត្តផែនការត្រូវធ្វើតាម
Concerning the operation, we had to implement according to the order. If we did not obey the order, it took place only in special circumstances. For example, when the individual was sick or very busy. So everyone who received the order needed to obey the order. They could not avoid it.
And when people disobeyed, what would happen to those who disobeyed the orders?
ក្នុងករណីដែលបុគ្គល
In case that there were individuals who disobey the order, they needed to do the tasks that assigned to them, and those tasks were supposed that they could carry it out.
I'm not sure that I got your full answer. Well, to be more specific, in case of severe disobedience, for example, a Navy chief who would refuse to stop a Vietnamese boat coming into Cambodian territorial waters, what would, in this case, would this chief be sanctioned, punished?
President, Mr. Witness, please hold on. The floor is given to Counsel Kung Samon. Mr. President, I would like to object this question because this question lead the witness to speculate. Thank you.
Not at all, Mr. President. I'm simply referring to examples that he might have encountered of chiefs who might have disobeyed the orders. So I simply wanted witness to have you tell me what were the sanctions if people disobeyed orders in Division 164.
President.
President, do you have any facts to establish and to show to the witness that there was the case of disobedience by the military commanders, and if no specific facts put to the witness, it is a kind of question to draw a speculation from the witness. So if you have the orders to show the witness, and then it is appropriate, you can ask if there were orders. So how did those people respect and disrespect the orders?
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think I'm going to proceed otherwise. I'm going to read out what the witness said in his WRI E319/23.3.54. Question 116. The following question was put to you. You attended a meeting during which you received orders aiming to implement the great policies, including the cleansing of enemies and of the Vietnamese. What happened to the cadres who refused to obey these orders? And you answered the following at answer 116. Towards the end of that answer, if we did not obey Ankar, they would send us to training, or they would send us to be re-educated. Question 119. Normally, those who were sent to be re-educated by their unit, did they come back to their unit afterwards? Answer. The answer that you provided. Nobody came back. They all disappeared forever. End of quote. Free translation. The only exception you mentioned is the example of Chun, who went to the Kompong Shnang worksite, airport worksite. So I would like to know what you mean by re-education, because earlier when we spoke about S21, you said that it was a re-education center. So when people were sent to be re-educated, did that mean that they were sent to a security center, or did that mean something else?
Answer. Based on the practices which I made a mention in my documents, I was referring to the offenders, those who committed offenses, particularly those who committed wrongs. Sending them to a far location or close location did not happen within my company, but it did happen in others' companies. I am now speaking in the circumstances that some companies sent those people to the places the locations you mentioned, and those who had been sent never returned. This is the statement in my document. So I am talking only what happened outside of my company. And you can refer to my example earlier. I was in charge of the vessels. I never encountered such events you described, but it did happen in other companies or units.
Donc, si je vous comprends bien, vous avez...
So if I understood you well, you respected the orders that were sent to you by your hierarchy scrupulously, so there were no instances of disobedience in your case?
Answer: that is the case. It is true. I was a practical person, so what I did, what I was doing at the time, reflected who I was. I never implemented any orders or regulation contrasting with the line.
Fine. And on the contrary, did lower-ranking cadres such as you, within the companies or on the vessels, were they allowed to take initiatives on their own or to take important decisions on board their vessels without speaking to their superiors, without knowing if their superiors would agree to that?
Answer: concerning the implementation of tactical strategies, for instance, when a machine did not work and we needed to repair it, this kind of issue needed to make a request to regiment, to battalion, regiment, and division, and after which there would be a reply, a response from those levels. After that time, we were able to repair the machine.
Thank you. Now I would like to turn to another topic. We will speak more about what happened around the islands tomorrow. Today I already spoke about this topic for a part, but before I go into depth about this, I'd like to speak about the ceremonies or the meetings that you might have attended in Phnom Penh during the DK regime. And did you travel to Phnom Penh on other occasions aside from the meeting you spoke about with Son Sen, in particular during major meetings of party cadres and army cadres at the Olympic Stadium or in other places for celebrations such as the celebration of the capture of Phnom Penh on 17 April, or maybe the anniversary of the foundation of the party on 30 September, or the anniversary of the creation of the Revolutionary Army of Kampuchea, which was celebrated, I believe, in January. Did you go to Phnom Penh to attend these kinds of ceremonies or to take part in these major meetings?
Answer: concerning the attendance within the anniversary of the party and of the victory on the 17th April, my company did not come to Phnom Penh to attend the ceremony. We would hold the ceremony within Kampong Sam location. However, when cadres were invited by the Commander-in-Chief, for instance, the commissioners of divisions, regiments, battalions were invited, they would come to attend the study sessions, said the witness.
Well, it appears to me that in your DCCAM interview, you said on page 91 in English, and on Khmer page 00926419, that you stayed in Phnom Penh in 1976, 1977, and that you saw Pol Pot give a speech, and that he gave that speech on the 17th of April. So, do you remember having said that?
Answer. In that document, I attended one meeting when I saw Pol Pot deliver the speech in Phnom Penh. That meeting was held in Olympic Stadium.
Est-ce que vous...
Do you remember the year when this meeting was held for which you traveled to Phnom Penh?
Answer. It may have happened in 1977.
And during the DK regime, did you have the opportunity to listen to Radio Phnom Penh or to read issues of Revolutionary Flag or Revolutionary Youth? I think you spoke about this in your interview, in fact.
Answer. I received the Revolutionary Flags or Red Flags magazines on a monthly basis, and I could have the access to the radio broadcast daily.
So therefore, I must conclude that you were a party member. Is that correct?
Answer. Yes, that is correct.
Je voudrais...
Now, I would like to read out excerpts of a speech given by Pol Pot, which in fact appeared in an issue of Revolutionary Flag, and I'd like to see if you're familiar with the issues he brought up or with the words he used in this speech, which was given on 17 April 1978. It's document E3/4604, and it's therefore an excerpt of the speech of Comrade Secretary of the CPK, and a first excerpt is on French page 00520344, English 00519833 and 34, and Khmer, it's quite approximate, but I believe it's 000647137 or 714. And Pol Pot in this speech speaks about the Vietnamese enemy, and this is what he says. The party requested that we crush the enemy forces as much as possible and asked that we defend our own forces as much as possible. There are not many of us, but we have to attack the enemies who are more numerous than we are. So, therefore, we must protect our forces to the best and crush their forces as much as possible. This is our slogan, which entirely relies on figures. One of our men must manage to defeat 30 Vietnamese at all costs. If we manage to follow this slogan, we will win. No matter the number of Vietnamese people, we will triumph over them in the end. In relation to any other country that would invade Cambodia, if we put into practice what is said in the slogan, we will win for sure. Up until today, we managed to implement what is said in the slogan, that is to say, the principle of 1 against 30. End of quote, free translation. In this excerpt, you maybe heard that Pol Pot was speaking about the fact that no matter the number of Vietnamese people, so therefore he's not making any distinction between Vietnamese civilians and Vietnamese soldiers. So did you hear him say that the enemies, or the enemy, which was Vietnam, also included Vietnamese civilians?
President, please hold on. Mr. Winner, you have the floor now, Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. President. I object to this question. The revolutionary flag clearly indicates that the speech was about Vietnamese troops. It's only troops that he speaks about. It's the exact same thing that he did in an interview in December '78 with Elizabeth Becker. It's very clear in that interview when he speaks about Vietnamese troops or the Vietnamese military or Vietnam in general as a country in its policy. He talks about Yun. When he talks about Vietnamese people, he talks about people from Vietnam. He makes that distinction very explicitly. But here it's very clear he speaks about war with Vietnam and the crushing of Vietnamese troops, not about civilians. Monsieur le Président.
Mr. President, I have read out an extract, and it is very clear. It talks of Vietnamese inhabitants. Regardless of the vision of the defense as regards this speech, I am relying on an extract of this speech. There are other extracts that I'll read out, and they also refer to Vietnamese inhabitants and not to Vietnamese soldiers. So may I request your leave to put this question to the witness?
President, the objection put by Victor Cope is overruled. There is a clear basis on the question put by the International Deputy Co-Prosecutor. Mr. Witness, you are instructed to respond to the question put by the International Co-Prosecutor, and if you do not recall it, you can ask the Co-Prosecutor to repeat it.
Est-ce que vous vous souvenez?
Do you remember having heard Pol Pot say that the enemy, the Vietnamese enemy, were the Vietnamese inhabitants?
Answer. In accordance with the revolutionary flag, there was a clear policy and strict guidelines for cadres to understand. But I would like to make a clear point that one of our soldiers needed to smash 30 Vietnamese soldiers who committed the aggression against the country. This was the guidelines made mention by Comrade Pol Pot in the revolutionary flag. That was true. That was the true statement made by him. The enemies of the Democratic Cambodia during the time had a very big ambition. I did have the same understanding of Comrade Secretary. Champa was swallowed by Yun. Cambodia Kram, or lower part of Cambodia, was swallowed by Yun. So there was a plan to swallow the country of Cambodia as well. As of now, this is still the case. I am one of Cambodian citizens, and I am still having the idea and understanding that there is still an ambition to swallow this country. President, Mr. Witness, please try your utmost to answer the question put to you, and you may only respond to the question to the limit of it. Please avoid stating your personal opinions which are not contributing to the ascertainment of the truth. It is your objective or subjective perception, but please give your response within the sphere of the answer, the question rather.
Merci, au moins comme ça.
Thank you, at least you know. In this speech, it is said that it was one Khmer soldier against 30 Vietnamese. In fact, we are referring to the forces of Pol Pot. And it is said that 2 million Cambodians would be enough to fight 60 million Vietnamese.
He keeps misleading you, Mr. President. He's talking about 30 Vietnamese troops, soldiers, 1 to 30. That was the amount of soldiers that the Vietnamese army had more. There's no mention at all about Vietnamese civilians. So he's really misleading you.
I would like to make a remark, if you would allow me, Mr. President, since in the document that my colleague has just cited, which I'm also reading in French, there is a translation of the word yun, and it's translated into French as the Vietnamese inhabitant, whereas in the English and Khmer versions, the word used is yun. So we have the same problem in French. But in the English and Khmer, the word used is yun, and there is no mention of the word Vietnamese.
President, you have the floor now. Council Kong Som On. Thank you, Mr. President. I want to have an observation on the document quoted. The Khmer is the original version. And in Khmer document, it states, the document makes mention about Vietnamese troops and soldiers, not civilian. So during some sentences below the line, which is clear about soldiers or forces, may use the pronoun to replace the words instead. So we have to be clear on the number of forces, 30 Vietnamese soldiers.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. President, can I proceed? I do not have the exact reference, but I know that if I were to look at that speech, I would see the exact reference. I'll find it tomorrow. And it is said shortly thereafter that with 2 million Cambodians, you would be able to defeat 60 million Vietnamese, and 6 million would still be left. Mr. Witness, did you hear Pol Pot say that?
Answer. This was a comparison of forces, of military forces, 1 to 30. It is clear in the document, and this is the document which quote the statement of Comrade Secretary. It was meant to encourage the soldiers to use the strategies to smash them.
Est-ce que je comprends que vous...
Do I understand from your testimony that you mean that all the Vietnamese inhabitants were soldiers, that is the 60 million? Because in the speech, reference is made to 100,000 Cambodian troops against 1 million Vietnamese. There were 60 million soldiers in Vietnam, sir.
Answer. In fact, Vietnamese soldiers did not consist of 60 million, and Cambodian or Cambodian soldiers consisted of 2 millions. The statement was meant to inspire Cambodian soldiers to utilize and prepare the lines to attack and capture the victory.
Très bien, je reste.
Very well. I'll leave it there for that extract. There is another extract further down. It's in French 00520338. In English 00519836. And in Khmer 000-64717. And Pol Pot says the following, and I quote, free translation. Since the very beginning, have the Vietnamese ever defeated us? They have always wanted to take over Cambodia to make it its vassals since 1930 and further down. In 1970, could they take Kampuchea? They could not take it. In 1975, were they able to take Kampuchea? They could not. And now, how about the Yun? They are no longer present in Kampuchea. Formerly, there were nearly 1 million of them. Now, there is not one seed. And in English, I believe reference is made to seed. And let me press on. Consequently, from the ideological standpoint, we have not failed. End of quote. Part of it was free translation. Witness. Did you hear Pol Pot or other party leaders or officials of Division 164 refer to the fact that measures had been taken against the Vietnamese residing in Cambodia before the capture of Phnom Penh on the 17th of April 1975?
Answer. From the statements you raised, and it is my understanding that that was the political line and also ideological standpoint, and it was meant to raise the spirits of soldiers to be ready in the battlefield, which was possible between Cambodian soldiers and Vietnamese soldiers. That was the real statement he made at the time, and it was like, a roadmap.
D'accord, mais toujours.
Very well. Nevertheless, he referred to 1 million Vietnamese living in Cambodia before he came to power, and that there weren't any left. Now, did you hear anyone talk of measures taken against Vietnamese, including the deportation of Vietnamese to Vietnam by DK officials at the beginning of the regime?
President, Mr. Witness, please hold on, and the floor is given to Counsel Victor Kope.
I object to the form of this question, Mr. President. Prosecution is leaving only one option as to why there were so few Vietnamese in 1975. One of the experts, more experts actually, describe massive deportations of Vietnamese by Lon Nol before 1975. So I think it's fair if that is also included in the question to this witness. Monsieur le Président.
Mr. President, I am talking of the Democratic Kampuchea regime and not about what happened before. We know that indeed the Lon Nol regime took measures against the Vietnamese, but that is not the thrust of my question. I am putting questions to the witness regarding measures taken by the government of Democratic Kampuchea vis-à-vis the Vietnamese.
Objection by Counsel Victor Koppe is overruled. The question is appropriate, so Mr. Witness, please answer to the question put to you by the co-prosecutor. Witness. I could not recall the year. Regarding the deportation of the Vietnamese to Vietnam, I could not remember when it happened. But I knew that there was deportation of the Vietnamese once in 1973. And there was also fighting in that year. And another deportation took place in 1975 or 1976. I could not remember well whether it was 1975 or 76, but there was another deportation at that time.
Est-ce que les Vietnamiens,
the Vietnamese who were not deported in 1975 and 1976, were they the subject of repressive measures subsequently in 1977 and 1978 in the country? We're talking of people who lived in Cambodia but who were no longer living in Cambodia subsequently.
I cannot answer that question because it was beyond my scope of responsibility, Mr. President. Mr. Witness, you cannot answer that. You chose not to answer the question because according to the instruction I read earlier that you had the responsibility to give answer to every question. You could say yes or no to the question, but you could not chose not to answer the question like this. Witness, my apology. Now I would like to rephrase my answer. I would like to say that I did not know about that matter because I was based at a different location. So that's my answer to your question.
Alors, dernier extrait du...
The last extract of Paul Paul's speech is on page 00520351 in French, 005 in English is 005198, or rather 938 up to 39, and in Khmer 000-64720. And I quote this extract of that speech. The Vietnamese again want to deceive people. They say that they recognize the land border, the border of the islands, but they do not recognize the maritime border. They are requesting to be allowed to negotiate again with us on the issue of the maritime border. However, the party has decided that we must continue to fight against them. We must fight until they recognize both the maritime border and the air border. We must keep on fighting 1 against 30 for them to recognize this. Recognize it on paper and recognize it on the world scene and dare not approach our borders against. We must keep on attacking them in our mission. We have to keep on defending. We must fight. End of quote. Part of it was free translation. Regarding maritime boundaries at the time, when you were serving in Division 164 in Regiment 140, according to this speech by Pol Pot, is it correct to say that the borders or the boundaries that had been recognized by the Cambodians were not the same recognized by the Vietnamese? I am talking of territorial waters, the distance of territorial waters from the islands, which was the subject of a debate between the Vietnamese and the Cambodians, or which were in dispute between the Vietnamese and the Cambodians.
In fact, I was not aware of that matter because it was under the authority of the upper echelon, specifically the Democratic Cambodia government that was in charge of that matter in relation to Vietnam.
Est-il arrivé que
Did it happen that Vietnamese Marines arrested on boats close to Cambodian islands contested the fact that they were in Cambodian territorial waters?
Let me clarify. Based on the information I received through the radio communication, that Vietnamese troops or Vietnamese boats which entered Cambodian territorial water, that I already gave my answer to question earlier, that one day there was one Vietnam and one Klung ethnicity on the island. And I asked a soldier there about where they came from, and the soldier told me he came from the southeast island. And I asked how far was it from Tang Island and how far was it from the Vietnamese maritime boundary. So the people, the soldiers who went out to arrest those people, we were not sure whether they arrested it from within Cambodian maritime boundary or inside the Vietnam maritime boundary.
donc vous n'étiez pas certain que c'est
So you are not sure that the arrest had been carried out in Cambodian territorial waters. Do you have other similar examples in which boats were arrested, whereas it wasn't clear in which territorial waters those boats were arrested or seized?
Based on the information I received, and this information was received through radio communication between the regiment level and the decision come from the regiment to my vessel that I was needed to be careful because based on the information sent to the regiment that there were boats entered our maritime water. It approached our islands in the southeast location. So the information was communicated every day to the vessels and reminding the people in charge of each vessel to be on alert about this.
Juste pour clarifier, vous avez...
To clarify matters, we heard someone of the Klang ethnic group. Is there something in your DC camp? Are we talking of someone of Indian nationality or Indian appearance?
I am not sure about this, but I would like to clarify that I asked the soldier who stood next to the two persons. One was a Vietnamese and another one was of Klang ethnicity. And then I walked past to do my task. So I'm not sure whether the person of Klang ethnicity was in fact of Indian ethnicity or not.
Merci. Je vais vous...
Thank you. May I request you to be more brief in answering my questions because we're running out of time. When you heard Pol Pot deliver his message on the 17th of April, and you said you thought it was in 1977, did you also see Khieu Samphan on that occasion?
Khieu Samphan did not attend it.
Est-ce que vous avez vu que...
Did you see Khieu Samphan deliver another speech on another occasion?
Based on my recollection, Khieu Samphan delivered speech through the radio every year. I never listened to his speech personally at any location. I only heard his speech through the radio.
En tout cas, devant le...
In any case, before DC camp, you did say that you saw him delivering a speech. And at the time, you referred to the speech delivered by Pol Pot as well. Do you confirm that you never saw him in Phnom Penh?
Pardon, je vais préciser que c'est la page 4.
Let me point out that it's page 91 in English, and in Khmer, 00926419.
Delivering a speech.
Regarding the meeting and what I gave in my statement in 2007, if we consider, moving back across time from 2007 to 1975. It was a long time between the two periods. So I did not have enough time to think about how to give the answer when I was interviewed. So I could not give a clear answer at that time about who was who when I was interviewed.
When you heard Que Sampan speak over the radio, make a speech over the radio, in 1978 in particular, that is to say that after the Vietnamese had attacked Cambodia in 1977, so in 1978 did he speak about this war with Vietnam?
As far as I can remember, he made an announcement to soldiers to be on alert and be ready to fight against the enemy who was invading our territory. So there was an announcement. There was an announcement to make the public aware of this. So it was a speech from him who was a senior leader of that regime.
Fine. You also spoke about a speech he made during the Mayaguez incident, during the capture of the Mayaguez vessel. And did Que Sampan speak about the fact that the Americans had said that they got lost in the Cambodian territorial waters? What did Que Sampan say about that?
I can recall at that time he did not say that the American ship got lost into our water, but it was from a media that reported that the ship got lost into Cambodia territorial water. So Khieu Samphan at that time said that the American had a lot of modern technology. So how come that the Americans said that their vessel got lost into Cambodian water territory? President, thank you. It is now convenient time for the adjournment. The chamber will resume its hearing tomorrow at 9 a.m. to hear this witness, Prom Samrat. Please be informed. Thank you, Mr. Sarat. The hearing of your testimony has not come to an end yet. You are therefore invited to come and testify once again tomorrow at 9. And also, the chamber would like to thank Mr. Moon Sawan, the duty counsel, and would like to invite you to come back tomorrow at 9 o'clock. Court officer with the vessel unit, please send Mr. Sarat to the place where he is staying at the moment and invite him back into the courtroom tomorrow at 9 a.m. Security personnel are instructed to bring Mr. Khieu Samphan and Nuon Chea back to the detention facility and have them returned tomorrow morning before 9 a.m. The court is now adjourned.